This is William and Lonsdale, a podcast about the legal ecosystem and the fascinating people who make it tick. Today, your host Michael Green speaks with His Honour Magistrate Trieu Huynh from the Bendigo Magistrates Court. At the age of 1, Trieu and his family came to Australia as refugees from Vietnam. From this brave yet humble beginning, Trieu went on to complete a double degree in law science with honours in genetics. After 5 years at the OPP and a stint in London, Trieu began one of his most satisfying work periods at Victoria Legal Aid. Among the many things Trieu loved about working there was being on his feet as a duty lawyer. He looks back fondly at the intensity of the role, the high volume and high pressure of the daily list, the camaraderie this engendered with his colleagues, and recognises it was a brilliant grounding for his work now as a magistrate. But as he moved up the ranks of VLA, ultimately becoming Program Manager of Indictable Crime, his time in court diminished, which he found challenging. And so he would occasionally bend the rules to make sure he was staying connected to the clients and the community VLA serves.
It wasn't really acceptable for a program manager to be sneaking off down to court 1 or 2 times a month to be doing a duty list, to be doing remands. But I think I'm safe to say it now that I did that. I suppose you've got to have some degree of flexibility and authority as program manager to be able to do those things. But yeah, I did sneak off a little bit to make sure that I was still connected to court work and the bread and butter, I think, of what legal aid was about.
Our guest today in Lies in the Law is His Honour Magistrate Trieu Huynh from the Bendigo Magistrates Court. Good morning, Trieu.
Good morning, Michael. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Trieu, rather than go back and start with your childhood, which actually is very interesting and we'll get to, I thought we might sort of dive right in the middle or even towards the end and talk about something which you're very passionate about, which is the Assessment and Referral Court. It caught my interest because I've never heard of it before and I've spent a lifetime in the law, and I suspect there are others in the law and in our general community who haven't heard of it. What is the Assessment and Referral Court and whereabouts does it fit in the system?
Sure. Yeah, the Assessment and Referral Court is something I am passionate about. I'm very fortunate to sit in ARC, or the ARC list as we call it, up in Bendigo with my colleague Magistrate O'Meara. So the Assessment and Referral Court, or ARC list as we call it, is a pre-sentence, goal-orientated therapeutic court that's established under Section 4, capital S of the Magistrates Court Act. It's really to support people in the criminal justice system who experience cognitive impairment or mental illness. And the idea is to support them to address the underlying factors that are associated with criminal offending. As we know, people with such vulnerabilities are overrepresented in the criminal justice system, especially in the prison population. And the idea is that in order to support them through an informal therapeutic jurisprudence type environment with goals to be set and goals to be complied with, it will help with them moving forward, but also assist with respect to community protection and community confidence in the justice system.
So, Trieu, just to clarify, the person may receive a custodial sentence and then still be receiving the therapeutic assistance from the ARC list?
They could. The ARC list is different to a mainstream court. Obviously, it's therapeutic in nature. There's also a legislative mandate for it to be informal. So there's a process by which a person is deemed eligible for the ARC list. It's non-adversarial, first and foremost. The person has to be pleading guilty to the charges before the court. They have to be on bail as well. Some people come into the ARC list initially from custody, but to get into the ARC list, one must be on bail. So it could be that the person with the aim of eventually getting into the ARC list applies for bail with firstly the support of the Court Integrated Services Program, a bail support program, before they're deemed eligible to come into the ARC list. And the eligibility criteria for ARC are set in Section 4T of the Magistrates Court Act. And they involve a diagnostic criteria that a person has to present with cognitive impairment or mental illness, so an intellectual disability, autism spectrum disorder, or neurological disorder, for example. They must meet the functional criteria, namely they have to have a substantially reduced capacity for self-care, self-management, social interaction or communication. There's a needs criteria that they would benefit from coordinated support through the court. And finally, there's a general criteria whereby the person has to consent to this and that the magistrate feels that it's an appropriate forum for them to be in. So to answer your question, yes, they could receive a custodial disposition at the end of it. But having said that, though, practically speaking, it is kind of counterintuitive to therapeutic jurisprudence to then have them re-enter custody. It's more sometimes a custodial disposition will be pre-sentence detention before they enter ARC. And that's part of the general criteria, whether a magistrate thinks that it's perhaps too serious to be going into the ARC list or whatever reason. The whole idea is that through this intensive program up to a year from and I'll go to it in a moment, the development, what we call an individual support plan, that they engage in therapy, that they engage in support and counselling and the various other bits and pieces to allow the court to make a proper determination as to disposition. My recollection is that as of, I think it was 2019, when there was a breakdown of the likely dispositions from ARC, that the majority of the sentences was an adjourned undertaking, and imprisonment was only down to, say, 3% or so, and I imagine that would have been largely pre-sentence detention.
How does a matter get into the ARC list? Does a magistrate say, I think this person in front of me should be referred to the ARC list? Or does a practitioner make an application, or how does it occur?
There's a number of different avenues. Those are the two major ones. I often will identify possible prospects for ARC when I'm sitting in mainstream court. Through a bail application, through a plea hearing, I'll identify that, wow, this person potentially meets the diagnostic criteria. They meet the functional criteria and the needs criteria. They're clearly crying out for help. Maybe in the past that hasn't been offered to them in an intensive way. And I'll say, perhaps this is something that we can consider. Alternatively, like you say, practitioners will think, yeah, my client is a suitable vehicle for this jurisdiction, and I'll make that referral. So the referral is made to the advanced case manager, who then does an eligibility assessment going through the criteria that I've just told you about. And then it goes into an eligibility hearing where I have a discussion with the participant or the proposed participant and their lawyer to see if they do meet that criteria and if they're really motivated to do it. It's a very finite, labour, resource intensive jurisdiction. And I myself am very mindful of that. And I am also very mindful of making sure that it's only the right candidates who come into ARC. I'm very open to considering a lot of people, but I really want those who are committed. That's my personal view.
Has ARC been going long enough for there to be data which prove that it is beneficial to people in terms of reoffending?
ARC started off in Melbourne in 2010 and it was quite successful, leading to an expansion in 2018 to Moorabbin, Frankston and the Latrobe Valley, I believe. And then the Royal Commission into Victoria's mental health system confirmed that, and as a consequence recommended that it ought be expanded across the various headquarter sites across Victoria and other suburban courts as well. As a consequence of that finding, Bendigo, where I sit, we were lucky to be the first court to come out of that recommendation. So we opened up our ARC list in July of 23, so we've been operating for just under 2 years now. Last year, it also expanded to Ballarat, Heidelberg and Dandenong. Shepparton opened up their ARC court in February. I believe Sunshine sometime middle of this year. and then further courts at the end and into 2026 as well. So there's clear evidence that it has benefit to participants in the community.
Has it been well received by the profession?
Very much so. Very much so. Both anecdotally, but as well as through empirical data, it's been very well received. Bendigo especially, I can speak to that through experience. We have stakeholder meetings where everybody sees the benefit of it. And in terms of the rollout to the other courts, the word from the court team that's rolling it out has been very, very positive.
That's most hopeful for our criminal justice system, Trieu, that such a thing. I didn't know it existed, but to hear about it and to hear the direction it's taking is something to be very hopeful about.
It's great because it's another tool that we can rely upon to address a lot of the things that we face in the court. It's part of a suite of therapeutic and specialist courts that the Magistrates Court has. There's also the Drug Court, Koori Court, Specialist Family Violence Courts, as well as the Court Integrated Services Program through bail. And it's to look more beyond the black and white of the criminal justice system and to see that there are these underlying causes and to address them potentially.
I want to get on to Bendigo, where you're the regional magistrate, Trieu, but I'd just like to follow up on you mentioning things like the Drug Court and the Koori Court. Are those courts, do they sit in every magistrate's court across the state?
Unfortunately, no. Drug Court, for example, is not a court that Bendigo has. I can't tell you exactly where Drug Court is available. I definitely know that most recent Drug Court was opened up in Shepparton a couple of years ago, but it's not available everywhere.
And Koori Court the same?
Koori Court, most courts, but again, not every court.
So let's move on to Bendigo. You are regional magistrate there. Is it different being a magistrate in a region as opposed to Melbourne? Now, I'm assuming when you started, you had time here in Melbourne, the Magistrate Court, which is across the road from where we're recording this morning, maybe Broadmeadows, I don't know, maybe Frankston, Dandenong, wherever.
That's correct, yes.
So you've got that background. Is it different working in those Melbourne courts, suburban courts, to working in a regional court?
I believe so. Each court attracts its differences. In terms of working in the regions, it involves a lot more travel because we sit at a number of different satellite courts as well. In Melbourne and in the suburbs, you generally sit at your court day in, day out. Whereas working in a regional setting, in the Loddon Mallee, Bendigo is our headquarter court, but we also sit in Castlemaine, Kyneton, Echuca, as far as Swan Hill, where I've been this week, Maryborough and Kerrang as well. So it's quite varied in that respect. It's also that in the regions, there's more of a spotlight on you. The anonymity of being in Melbourne gets lost a little bit, whereas in the Loddon Mallee, at least, I'm one of 6. Our decisions often make it to the local newspaper, if not beyond, and there is a bit of a focus on what you do.
So in a regional, working in a region as a public figure, a magistrate, you might bump into a person who's come before you in the court, in the supermarket, at the football on a Saturday, at a social event. What do you do?
You have to be very mindful. You're always aware, not to the point where it debilitates you by any measure, but it has happened on the odd occasion in that small regional setting, especially so when you're in one of the satellite courts in a smaller environment. You just have to be polite. I haven't been subject to direct interaction from a member of the public with whom I've had some dealings with in court. It can get awkward at times, but I suppose to answer your question, Michael, it's really just to extricate yourself from the situation as best as you can. It becomes especially awkward, I guess, when I'm with family. And in those circumstances, again, it's just to remove yourself. My family know the pressures of my job. They know some of the complications as well. And it's more just a quiet look. They kind of know when I need to move away quickly. It's for good reason.
What about the balance of work in a regional court? Is it a different balance? I mean, as what I've heard is that more and more of the work of the Magistrates Court is being with intervention orders, domestic violence and crime, I guess the majority of the work. Is it the same balance in Bendigo, in Swan Hill, in Kyneton, wherever?
Each court has its own nuances. Even from one side of Melbourne to the other, there can be different, frequency of different types of work In the region, you're right, there is a lot of family violence, but I guess that's the case everywhere. But what I love about working in the regions is that diversity. It's predominantly crime, but it's also a good mix of summary crime and indictable crime that we undertake. There's also children's court, both crime and family division that we deal with, and civil work as well. There's also those unique applications that come through, things that we haven't dealt with very frequently that always keeps you on your toes. Sometimes it's a case where unfamiliarity with such applications requires you to stand down and either do some research into it or speak to a colleague about it. But I guess that's what I love about the job. It's the variety and just the intellectual rigor with which you've got to apply with your day-to-day tasks.
I guess we better get back to the start of all this, which is you coming to Australia as a baby from Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that. How did that come about, and how did your mum and dad and you and your brother come to be here?
We came to Australia when I was quite young, just after a year old, I believe. We came as what's commonly referred to as boat people.
Refugees.
Mum and dad, we came in 1982, I think it was. I was still but a baby in mum's arms. My brother was 6 years older than me. They felt that they were forced to leave because of the discrimination and persecution they experienced coming from families that were very involved with the South Vietnamese army. Accordingly, following the fall of Saigon in 1975, there was very little opportunity for them. And that's what really, forced them to leave Vietnam and seek a better life elsewhere.
I'm assuming leaving Vietnam wasn't something they could do openly and just make a decision and go to the office of a airline or a boat company and say, can we get a trip to Australia, please? So how did that come about? What were the details of it?
Yeah, that's right. I've been told quite a number of times from my parents about how they came to Australia. Firstly, as you say, it wasn't something they could do openly. It had to be in secret. The concern was if they were to reveal this or their plans to others that it could be leaked, they could be discovered, and as a consequence, they could be detained. So as I understand it, mum and dad kept it to themselves until the night before they were due to go. On the evening before their intended departure, they told my maternal grandparents of their plans. And because of the danger associated with it, the fear of capture by the authorities, but also for pirates on the seas, my maternal grandfather was very against the idea. He even suggested to my parents that they leave my brother behind. So if anything were to happen, then at least there's one member of the family to remain. But my father was very adamant that we all go together, despite the risks. And so as I understand it, that evening, against my grandfather's wishes, we all left. My brother being about 6 or 7 at this time, me being just over a year old, being carried by my mum. My parents trudged through the mangroves leading up to the river where they believed that the boat would be. Now, I understand that they had paid a fee for passage, but there was also no guarantees that the boat was actually going to be there. And I understand that it was a quite substantial amount of money as well. Now, my parents left with basically the clothes that they were wearing and what we were wearing. My parents told me that they had sewed some gold into the lining of their clothing because they weren't able to bring any bags or anything like that. But upon making it to the river, or maybe on the boat, I'm not sure, they realised that in that journey through the mangroves that it had come loose and all of their wealth had disappeared into the mangrove somewhere. So they literally had nothing. Thankfully, the boat was there and we made it on board. 3 days and 3 nights, I'm told, it took for us to travel the seas to get to Malaysia. A harrowing experience from what my mum tells me. But she, I think, due to the trauma of it all, hasn't really gone into too much detail with me. But I think it was a very difficult experience for everyone.
And then the family would have stayed in a refugee camp in Malaysia for a period of time, I assume, before coming to Australia.
Yeah. And thankfully it wasn't that long, a number of months possibly. The family legend, I guess, is that the intention of my parents, like most Vietnamese fleeing Vietnam, was to go to the United States. And as I understand it, my dad was on his way to the US Embassy to lodge the paperwork, but somewhere along the way, he made the unilateral decision to deviate and go to the Australian Embassy instead. And the rest is history, as they say. We got lodged, he lodged the paperwork, and we got accepted into Australia and found our way to Australia in, I think, 1982.
So let's bring ourselves to that time in 1982 when you are in Australia. Whereabouts did you grow up?
We initially stayed in a migrant hostel in Maribyrnong. Mum and Dad learnt basic English, met some people that they knew and some friends. We then stayed in a small flat in Maribyrnong, followed by a Housing Commission flat in Kensington. We were there for a little while before eventually Mum and Dad had worked hard enough to be able to purchase a home in West Sunshine.
Just stop there. They must have worked very hard.
I believe so. Dad worked in a factory, peanut factory, so he worked for peanuts, literally, back in the day. And they worked incredibly hard to be able to save a deposit to get a house, and that was roughly 1986.
What about your schooling? You must have memories of that. So you start school here. I mean, the local state school, I assume, in Maribyrnong maybe?
My earliest recollection is going to South Kensington Kindergarten and then to Holy Rosary Primary in Kensington, followed by going to St Paul's in West Sunshine.
Any difficulty fitting in? Were kids accommodating to you, or was there racism shown towards you?
No racism as such, but I always felt different. Back at that time, there weren't too many Asian kids, let alone Vietnamese kids in the playground, especially in Sunshine. Nowadays, Sunshine has a very big Vietnamese population. Back at that time, I think it was our family and one other family. So whilst I don't recall any discrimination or racism as such, I always felt different to the other kids. And so as a consequence, I did whatever I could to try and assimilate. Football, AFL, was one thing that really allowed me to connect with the others.
So you made the very bad decision of barracking for Carlton.
Thanks for bringing that up, Michael. But yes, football, I've realised, brings me nothing but anxiety these days. So I generally tend to avoid it at this time. But having said that, though, it is something that has brought me lots of friendship over the years as well.
St Paul's Primary School in Sunshine West is where you do your primary school?
Yep, that's right.
Preps to grade 6. There's a woman there called Mrs Brooks, who seemed to be an influential teacher.
She was my grade 6 teacher, and upon reflection was one of the most influential, if not the most influential educator in my life for 2 reasons. One, I put a lot of pressure on myself as a kid. Being a migrant kid, I felt there was a lot of pressure to do well. Knowing the sacrifices that my parents had made, I felt a lot of pressure to justify all their sacrifices by doing well at school. I thought that it was always taught to me, but I also embraced the idea that education was a way to progress. So as a child, I put a lot of pressure on myself to do well. Mrs. Brooks recognised that and recognised that it was somewhat detrimental to my well-being and took me aside and tried to help me through that. And I think she did a great job in doing so, recognising that whatever academic pursuits I was aiming for, it needed to be done in the proper way and in a safe way, and recognise that my mental well-being was important even at that age. So she was crucial in that respect, and it has fundamentally given me better direction in my life. Mrs. Brooks also recognised that I was bright and accordingly invited my parents in for a parent-teacher interview, and through an interpreter explained that she thought I could do well potentially at a private school, though my parents wouldn't be able to afford it. So she suggested that perhaps I apply for some scholarships. And as a consequence of that recommendation, Mum and Dad put me down for some scholarship exams. And thankfully, I got a scholarship to my high school, being Westbourne Grammar.
Have you made any contact with Mrs. Brooks since finishing grade 6?
I have. After being appointed, I had cause to reflect upon my life and professional life, and I thought about Mrs. Brooks quite deeply. And so I reached out to my old primary school, who then made a few inquiries, and they were able to get her contact details and pass it on. So in early 2020, I think it is, before we all got locked down in the pandemic, I invited Mrs. Brooks out to lunch one day to thank her for her influence on my life and all the recommendations she made. And she brought out my old grade 6 school photo, pointed me out. She also pointed out a few other kids that she had updates on, which was great to find out where they've gone to, because I haven't stayed in touch with anyone. So that was a really pleasant experience.
So Mrs. Brooks helps you, well, you apply for the scholarship, you get a scholarship to Westbourne Grammar. Mm-hmm. Did you enjoy your time there?
Yeah, I really did. It was difficult to adjust because it was a private school, blazers, ties, things that I'd never experienced before. I had to get assistance from a family friend to tie my tie, and I spent weeks practicing before school started, not realising that there was a summer uniform, so I had an entire term to be able to do that. But still, it was very different. Mum and Dad also bought me a really oversized blazer, optimistically thinking that I'd grow into it, but I don't think I ever did. So you can imagine a small kid in year 7 first day in this huge blazer, looked like Tom Hanks from Big. It was a bit of a difficult start, a bit of an adjustment, but overall I really had a great time at Westbourne. I reflect upon my time there with fond memories, great experiences, great opportunities, and really setting me up for my life to be.
Although you were originally thinking it might be setting up, or hoping it was setting up to do medicine.
Possibly, yeah. Having no real tangible connection to a profession, as one would say, law, medicine, or whatever it might be. Law and medicine were things that I was aspiring to potentially go into, not really knowing much about what life was really like in either of those professions, but it was something that my parents seemed to value. It was they were professional or areas that seemed to be held in esteem, and at that stage, I guess I wanted to please my parents and again justify their sacrifices. So I guess in a nebulous kind of way, aiming towards those professions.
And you didn't do medicine; you went on and did law. What happened there? Why did you go down the legal path and not down the medical path?
To be frank, I don't think I got the scores for medicine, but enough to get into science law. Science was something that I was very passionate about and still am, I guess, but it was also an option, I guess, if I wanted to pursue medicine at a later stage. But again, law, because I thought it was fascinating, having read a lot of books at that time, but again, not really knowing what life in the law was going to be like. But it was an opportunity. Everyone sold it as a great pathway to other fields at that time, that it could open many doors as well. So I thought that I'd do that and see how it went.
But you got an honours degree in science at Monash. I think genetics was the core of what you did. You didn't think then I can move across to medicine from science, because that's a common thing?
Yeah, I was still open to a career in science at that point. So I did law and science together. I finished my Bachelor of Science, and at that point I had to decide what I wanted to do. And genetics was really kind of opening up at that time. And I thought, this is a fascinating field. Perhaps there's a career in this. And an opportunity presented itself to do an honours degree with Professor Alan Trounson at the Institute of Reproduction and Development, as it was then called, working with stem cells. And so I thought, there's nothing stopping me from pausing on law for a little while and seeing how this goes. So I spent a year doing my honours degree in genetics at that institute. So
when did law click for you? Because you've gone a fair way down the science path. So when did it suddenly click that, hang on, law is the career I'd like to follow?
It was probably towards the end of the honours degree when I realised that maybe science wasn't the career path for me. Really fascinating. I find the idea of learning something new, potentially being the first person to know this information, a really interesting prospect. But I also felt that it could be a lot of toil for potentially no result. And yes, science is all about the process as well. Just because you don't get the result that you want, you've still contributed in a way by closing off that door in one way. But I felt like I needed more tangible results and something a bit more quicker. So I thought I'd go back to law and continue that and see what door opens.
And a door did open?
It did. Towards the back end, though, it was really when I was doing professional practice at Springvale Monash Legal Service in my final year that I then felt that real connection to the law. Up until that point, a lot of the subjects I was doing, I didn't really feel connected to. By representing real people, by dealing with real life matters, I felt it relevant to me. Again, being a kid from the western suburbs, from a migrant family, mergers and acquisitions, corporations law, all those sorts of things didn't resonate in a way. But the person who, with a minor theft because he was hungry, or a person with a lot of vulnerabilities causing him to spiral. I understood that because growing up in the western suburbs, I was exposed to disadvantage, I guess, and I could understand how things could take a negative turn. So it connected. And
so you go on to do articles at the OPP, Office of Public Prosecutions, there for 4 or 5 years?
That's right.
Did you enjoy... You're doing crime, which is something that was a part of the law you liked.
Yep.
Being a prosecutor, being on the prosecutorial side of the criminal equation, you were happy to be there?
Yeah, really happy. Really happy because it gave me great training. I met some fantastic people, some wonderful mentors there as well. Again, it was something that I could understand and a lot of people, the community can understand as well. It was a fascinating time of my life.
So, Trieu, you had 4 or 5 years at the OPP working at a high level with major criminal matters. Did you come out a better lawyer? Did you learn things there which you may not have learned elsewhere?
Absolutely. The exposure to such complex criminal cases gave me, I don't think I could get a better training environment than that. Also, the availability of some really brilliant minds at the time, and now I'm sure, to be able to train me, give advice, also to be able to teach those soft skills with respect to forensic direction, but also the technicalities of the criminal justice system. I can't imagine a better place to be able to train. Obviously, I can only speak from my personal experience, but again, I look back upon my time there with really fond memories.
So taking all that into account, why did you toddle off to London in 2009?
I suppose like the beginnings of many great adventures, Michael, it was for love. My then girlfriend, now wife, was given an opportunity to work in London, and I couldn't bear the thought of not being with her. So I resigned from my position at the OPP and blindly followed her across the oceans to London.
So she had a job lined up, I think, with one of the major commercial firms over there.
That's correct, yes.
What was on offer for you in the way of work?
To be with her. But sorry, that's not work. It was a bit of a surprise when we turned up because it was towards the back end of the global financial crisis. So they had thought that there was a hiring freeze, but she had been given this opportunity, I think, a little bit before that. For me, however, because of that environment, there was little on offer. I spent a fair bit of time out of work before landing a paralegal job at a small private firm in North London, which really didn't gel with me much at all.
This was civil work, was it?
This was civil work, yeah. So not something that I'd been accustomed to, but I quickly adapted to it. It was largely research for litigation that they were doing and something that I could apply the skills that I learned at law school and also at the OPP too. So that wasn't too difficult, but I didn't have any passion for it. And following a few months there was a job opportunity at the Crown Prosecution Service, albeit as a paralegal. And so I decided to apply and I was given that job.
And that was using the skills you'd learned at the OPP?
In a way, but to a lesser degree, I suppose. It was an environment that was particularly tough. I recall in the training group that I was assigned to, there were a number of solicitors who weren't able to work, therefore had to accept jobs with the CPS as paralegal or paralegal assistants. So obviously I'd gone there in the hope of being a lawyer, but given the qualification standards and the fact that I really couldn't earn much money without being qualified, there wasn't much opportunity for me.
And the qualification you needed was to be admitted to practice in the UK, which would have required some further study of some sort.
And experience, I believe. And given I didn't have any connections over there, it was really difficult to get a job in order to be qualified.
So you and your wife come back after a year. in the UK?
Yes, just a little over a year, about 18 months, if memory serves me right. She came back a little bit later than I did. It was at the time of our lives where friends were getting married, some friends were having kids, and I felt the pull of home, I suppose. Felt like we were missing out on all these special events, and I just felt like I wanted to come back.
Was it easy finding a job when you got back?
Whilst the pull was very strong, I wanted to line up work before I came back. And so I was actively looking, and I did see a job being advertised at Victoria Legal Aid. So I interviewed for that. I wasn't fortunate enough to get the job, but about a week or two later, I got a call from the person who would soon to be my manager. He told me that there was a 3-month contract on offer, and would I be prepared to take it? He didn't give me any promises that it would be extended. A bit of a leap of faith. I thought, I'll commit to this. I'll see how I go. And so I came back on a 3-month contract at Legal Aid.
Which became 10 years.
Which became 10 years and a few different roles later.
Did you find it difficult changing from being a prosecutor with the OPP, plus the work you did in London, to acting on behalf of the accused? People charged sometimes with terrible crimes.
Yes and no. The fundamentals were basically the same, the technicalities of the criminal justice system. The learnings and the training that I got at the OPP gave me a great foundation for that. I suppose the objective and the end game is different. It's also, I think, in my view and in my experience, more difficult because you sometimes feel a direct responsibility to a person as opposed to the state largely. I didn't think that it was a difficult transition. It was more just different.
What were your roles at the VLA?
I started off as a duty lawyer, going down to court representing people who had just been remanded or who turned up in the mention list with matters that they needed some assistance with.
Can I just check? So you're going to court each day as a duty lawyer?
Yep.
You weren't tempted to come to the bar?
I was tempted, but at that stage my personal circumstances kind of didn't allow for it.
You needed a wage?
Pretty much. There are a few different reasons. There wasn't a law to go to the bar, but I thought that would be later down the track. At that point, I just wanted to consolidate, learn my craft as a defence lawyer. And in fact, at that time, I really enjoyed it. A great group of people, really fun environment, and I was learning a lot as well.
And so you're a duty lawyer to start with. What other roles did you have with the VLA?
Soon after I started Legal Aid, there was a restructure which separated us kind of into specialist teams. I got assigned to the indictable crime team because of my background at the OPP. And in addition to doing duty lawyer work, I was assigned a caseload of indictable cases, some complex ones as well. Did that for a little while. And then I was given a position as a senior lawyer. Did that for a while as well before I was appointed deputy managing lawyer of the team. I did that.
This is the indictable crimes team?
This is the indictable crime team. So I did that for a little while as well. I was then given an opportunity to be an associate public defender at VLA Chambers, where I was able to do advocacy. I was briefed to do appearance work, largely in the magistrates and the county court.
You wouldn't do trials?
I juniored in trials, but not solo at that time. I did that for the better part of a year, and it was at that stage that we were due to have our first child, and I felt that I needed to spend some more time with my family and be present as a dad, because that to me is the most important thing. And so I stepped back from Chambers and went back to my deputy managing lawyer position. From that point, there was an opportunity to become program manager of indictable crime, and I was given that position in 2015.
I don't want to move on yet to your appointment as a magistrate. I'd like to talk a bit more about the VLA because, again, like we started off with the Assessment and Referral Court, you being very passionate about, you're also very passionate about the role the VLA plays in our criminal justice system. Why? Why is the VLA so important to our system?
I guess I'm passionate about the criminal justice system as a whole, and I believe that every cog that is part of it is a vital cog. Obviously, because I've spent a lot of time at both in prosecution but also at legal aid, I can speak to it directly. It provides for robust, really high-quality representation of some of the most vulnerable members of the community. Members of the community who, without the representation of legal aid, would be severely disadvantaged, in my view. not being able to navigate the system, nor being able to communicate or advocate for themselves properly. It's also full of very dedicated people who go above and beyond, looking not only at the criminal offending, but also a lot of the time things beyond that, looking at holistic lawyering and very much like the ARC list, the underlying root causes of criminal offending, and work well beyond their remit sometimes, and really trying to assist people broadly.
William and Lonsdale is brought to you by Green's List, one of the leading multidisciplinary barristers lists in Australia. Green's List believe in promoting conversation around the ideas and issues that shape not only our legal system, but our wider community.
Trieu, I think a lot of people might wonder about how lawyers can defend people, argue their cases in court on their behalf when they've been charged with terrible crimes right up to murder and other terrible crimes. Did you find that difficult?
I did. You can't help but find it difficult. The subject matter, of course, is difficult. Often the clients can be difficult as well. It's also the scrutiny that comes with those sorts of cases. So I'd be lying if I said it wasn't difficult. Having said that, though, it's important that people who are who are accused of really
heinous crimes, as we would say.
It's important that they get robust representation. It's part of the system. As I said, I'm passionate about the law and the rule of law, and that's why I felt that for every person, regardless of what they were charged with, deserved representation to the best of my ability.
Another thing I wanted to follow up on, I've heard many barristers say, criminal barristers, Trieu, that although murder trials have got the highest stakes and therefore the highest profile and appear to be have the most pressure attached to them, in fact, murder trials can be easier, both factually and legally. Was that your experience?
Sometimes, yes, in the sense that with respect to those types of cases, normally the most experienced investigators are assigned. And normally, in terms of the conduct of the investigation, it's largely done very well. Normally, you have the best counsel involved and very experienced judicial officers as well. So in that respect, ordinarily it runs quite smoothly, if I could say. Clearly the stakes are higher than any others, but it really depends on how you define difficult. I found in my experience the difficult cases were your clients who experienced severe mental health issues and where it was difficult to get instructions from, where disclosure was missing from your hand-up brief, where there was lots of variables that affected the smooth running of a case, whereas even funding issues sometimes, getting the information that you needed for that was tough sometimes. But in terms of those trials that you've referred to, they normally ran quite smoothly, so to speak. Forensically, they were difficult. Technically, they were difficult. But in terms of the management and how it ran, they were not so bad.
Trieu, from what you've said, clearly in your time at the VLA, maybe the most enjoyable thing or the most satisfying thing for you was to be a duty lawyer in court, on your feet, dealing with people, their problems, a multitude of people and a multitude of problems, but getting things done in a day. But the higher you went at the VLA, the less opportunity you had to do that. Did you find that frustrating?
Upon reflection, a little. Upon reflection, you're right. Some of my best times at legal aid were as a duty lawyer, having to deal with people at their most heightened. There's a certain thrill about that, in the sense that you just don't know what's going to happen. It's also the camaraderie of being a duty lawyer with your colleagues, having to deal with a high volume list, each being assigned X amount of people and having to get it done with the pressures of the judiciary on your back, as well as other stakeholders. Sometimes people are at their most vulnerable and not so polite, one could say. But it gave me such fantastic grounding eventually to be a magistrate that I look back upon those days in particular with really fond memories. There's also a great satisfaction at the end of the day when collectively, as a team, you have just knocked it out of the park. not only in terms of just being able to complete the list, but to do so professionally, get good results for clients as well. So with that in mind, as I progressed through legal aid, there was less and less opportunity to do that. As program manager, which was a fantastic job, it gave me great insight into the broader workings of the organisation and how it connected into the system broadly. It was a job that gave me insight into strategy, finance, policy, and a lot of other things. It did take me away from that court work, which I really had great affinity for. It wasn't really acceptable for a program manager to be sneaking off down to court 1 or 2 times a month to be doing a duty list, to be doing remands. But I think I'm safe to say it now that I did that. I suppose you've got to have some degree of flexibility and authority as program manager to be able to do those things. But yeah, I did sneak off a little bit to make sure that I was still connected to court work and the bread and butter, I think, of what legal aid was about.
You worked there for 10 years and obviously enjoyed it and had a very strong commitment to the VLA. But at the end of that 10-year period, you are appointed a magistrate. What was the process for you to become a magistrate? I think the days of receiving a phone call from the Attorney General no longer exist, or existed then anyway, so you had to actually be proactive about it.
It's very much like any other job application I've ever done. There was an expression of interest. There were key selection criteria too.
Was there an ad in the paper or an ad online or something?
Yeah, it was online. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
From memory, it's some time ago now. But there was an ad in the paper calling for expressions of interest, asking candidates to address key selection criteria, which I did. Then I was invited to interview, and like a lot of interviews, it was a panel of very impressive people. It was very nerve-wracking. Lots of questions asked, and I don't think I answered the questions well, but enough, I think, to be given an opportunity, I think.
There's a but in there, isn't there?
I wasn't successful the first round. I was put on the short list, I'm told, but I wasn't successful around that time. It was still a little bit of time later before I was invited to reapply again, and I was invited to interview again. And following that, about 6 months later, I was given the call.
I liked what you said, Trieu, and I think people should hear this who are going for interviews for jobs. You said on the second interview, you focused on your values rather than your technical ability. And I think that's really good advice for anyone to think about. If you're going to go to an interview, speak about your values. Don't try to dazzle them with your technical ability.
I think that's right. It's very similar to a piece of advice I was given when I was appointed, when I asked a judicial colleague, what type of magistrate should I be? And her advice was, don't try and be a particular type of magistrate. Don't have a different persona. You were appointed because of your values and your experiences, so just be who you are. And I think that's the kind of philosophy that I was applying, that I was approaching in that second interview. I think I was a bit too nervous in that first interview. I felt like there was a lot riding on it. In that second interview, I thought they've obviously seen something to afford me a second chance, and therefore I just focused more on me and what I could bring, a point of difference, I guess, what my experiences, how my experiences could add value to the community as a magistrate.
So you are appointed, as I think with all freshly appointed magistrates, you go to a variety of suburban courts here in Melbourne?
Predominantly at Melbourne, but I did spend time at Broadmeadows and also had the opportunity to sit in a few other courts such as Sunshine, Werribee and Heidelberg. Those are the courts that I've sat at. Did
you receive any training?
Oh, lots of training, yes. We got a lot of training in our computer system.
I meant more training in being a judicial officer.
There's a lot of training. There's a lot of shadowing to begin with, and the court gives you enough time, not too much time, but enough time that you can feel comfortable shadowing before sitting on your own. But I think they're very good with respect to their selection process to know who can kind of hit the ground running. There is obviously training in a few different areas that we're not so familiar with in terms, for example, for me, civil, but it's a lot of learning on the job as well. But my experience, and I guess similar to a lot of newly appointed magistrates, our experience as practitioners has given us great foundation to be magistrates, especially as a duty lawyer as well. Our jurisdiction is one of high volume. It's one of very difficult people sometimes, self-represented litigants. So with that in mind, my experiences as a duty lawyer held me in good stead to be a magistrate, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Lives in the Law is proudly sponsored by City Maps Illustrated. Their recent publication, The Melbourne Map, is a celebration of our wonderful city. This stunning, hand-drawn illustration, which took more than 3 years to create, is available as an art print, jigsaw puzzle and calendar. The perfect acquisition for your home, office or corporate gifting.
The last 4 years you've been regional magistrate in Bendigo.
Yes.
And you're thinking about you'd be happy to remain at Bendigo. You enjoy that role as a regional magistrate.
I do enjoy it, yes.
How did you get there? Was it just part of the merry-go-round where you say, well, Trieu, you're off to Bendigo for the next 2 years, or was it you had the opportunity to make a decision or make an application?
Magistrates are told from the very onset that during their tenure they're required to do a stint in the regions, 2 years at this point. And so my wife and I, knowing that, actively decided that we would like that opportunity. So we expressed our interest in a regional placement. There's a bit of serendipity involved because I initially wanted a region other than Bendigo, but it so happened to be that Bendigo was available. And after making a few phone calls to colleagues, we decided to commit, and that's how we've found ourselves there.
If you had a crystal ball looking ahead, can you see yourself being a magistrate for 30-odd years? Would you like to progress to some different role, or do you just take whatever comes on a day-by-day basis?
I'm very happy and very privileged to be a magistrate. I kick myself pretty much every day that I've been given this opportunity. There's something new about the job each and every day, and I'm very comfortable just consolidating all my learnings over the past 5 years, and hopefully that will continue over the next 2 and a bit decades. I would like to be able to expand to do work in the other therapeutic courts, the specialist courts. I sit in Koori Court and the ARC list. Perhaps if there's an opportunity in drug court one day, I might like to put my hand up for that as well. In terms of aspirations for anything else, that's not really in my line of sight. Again, it's because I'm learning something new every day. I just want to focus on continuing to serve my immediate community as well as the Victorian community broadly, to do my job as best as I can, and to do so in a way that allows me to still remain to be the good father and husband that I think I am. And hopefully my family agrees with that. It's that juggle between the pressures of being a judicial officer and just being an ordinary person that is sometimes a struggle, but something that's important to me and something that I try to manage as best as I can.
Trieu, thank you very much for sharing your life in the law with us. Thanks to your mum and dad for coming to Australia as they did all those years ago and bringing you here to us. It's been wonderful to hear your story.
It's an absolute pleasure, Michael. Thank you for the opportunity.
Show notes from today's episode can be found at greenslist.com.au/podcast. There you'll find links to things we've talked about in this episode, a transcript of the show, and some wonderful photos of our guests. If you're enjoying Lives in the Law, please tell your networks, subscribe, rate and review the show. Your host is former lawyer and Greens List clerk Michael Green. Our show is produced and edited by me, Catherine Green, mixed and mastered by Windmill Audio, and recorded by Alex McFarlane, who also wrote and performed all the music for the series. We're coming to you from the iconic Owen Dixon Chambers on the corner of William and Lonsdale Streets in our beautiful city of Melbourne. We acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of this land and pay our respect to their elders past and present. There is no doubt that conversations about justice have been taking place on this land for thousands of years, and we are privileged to continue that discussion here today.